And unlike Rush Limbaugh, I am not going to mock his death. Unlike Rush, I'm not going to take this opportunity to piss on his grave and laugh at him, because I find that undignified and I don't want to do it. What I am going to do is try to counter some of this revisionism that's being pushed by people like Ted Cruz, saying that he was like, what was it that Ted Cruz said? Let me pull it up on my personal thing. That he was a lion-hearted defender of freedom. And he was a patriot. Now, patriot can have a lot of meanings. Patriot can have a lot of meanings. Let me source that quick right here. Here you go. A lion-hearted defender of freedom. He is not one. And I'm going to tell you exactly why Rush was not a lion-hearted defender of freedom. And I don't like, go after the dead. I don't. I find it undignified. I believe everyone's a human being. But he was not a lion-hearted defender of freedom. In fact, he was anti-freedom for the vast majority of his commentating career. And during the beginning of it, during the middle of it, and all the way till the end of it. He was not fighting for freedom. Let me pull the chat off screen since you guys can't even be seen anyway because of the white background. Let's go through some of his most outrageous moments first. And then I'm going to go into some of his clips. And then probably the most egregious thing he's ever done. Okay. It was August 1st, 1988. Ronald Reagan was about to finish his second term. Michael Dukakis had just become the Democratic nominee for president, and the Republican convention was just a couple of weeks away. And a 37-year-old named Rush Limbaugh premiered his nationally syndicated radio show on WABC in New York City. 25 years later, he spent countless hours on the radio, inspiring his ditto-head followers, and leaving more than a few liberals shaking their fists and rolling their eyes. To celebrate his quarter century on the air, we rounded up 25 of his most outrageous moments from his last 25 years. The racist, the sexist, and the downright flabbergasting. So we're gonna go into just some of these moments. We're gonna go through these first. There's a lot of them. But then I'm going to get really deep into the type of commentary he engaged in and why exactly he wasn't a defender of freedom. Number 1. Have you ever noticed how all the composite pictures of wanted criminals resemble Jesse Jackson? Obviously, he's saying criminals are the black people. Very obvious with that one. And trust me, Rush Limbaugh's best skill was never subtlety. He made this comment around 1990. Socks is the White House cat, but did you know there's also a White House dog? Comments made while displaying a picture of Chelsea Clinton. Obviously, he was calling her a bitch. But let's be clear, he called her that when she was 13. So it would have been bad, period. But he said that about a child. Women should not be allowed on juries where the accused is a stud. Very obvious. When a gay person turns his back on you, it is anything but an insult. It's an invitation. An invitation to what? I would assume not anything good. Mr. Clinton testicle lockbox. Although Limbaugh has been implying since the 1990s that Hillary Clinton metaphorically castrates men, keeping the spoils in a testicle lockbox, he used the phrase again as recently as February 2013. Feminism was established so as to allow unattractive women easier access to mainstream society. The media has been very... Does anybody know how to say that word? I'm terrible with pronunciation. By the way, I've always found that men that fear powerful women, or just women who are just strong generally, I always find them to be some of the most weak-willed, spineless men in the world. Dangerous, okay. The media has been very dangerous that a black quarterback do well. There is little hope invested in McNabb, and he got a lot of credit for the performance of this team that he didn't deserve. The defense carried the team. I think it's time to get rid of this whole National Basketball Association. Call it the TBA, the Thug Basketball Association, and stop calling them teams. Call them gangs. This was in 2004, after a brawl erupted during a basketball game. Of course, thug being something that's regularly thrown at black people, and the gang one is pretty easy to follow as well. Women still live longer than men because their lives are easier. He is exaggerating the effects of his disease. He's moving all around and shaking. It's purely an act. This is shameless of Michael J. Fox. Either he didn't take his medication or he's acting. This was around Michael J. Fox's developing situation with Parkinson's disease. Now, the irony here is obvious, but I'm not going to dwell on it. He's exaggerating. Oh, I already went over that. Let me put it to you this way. The NFL all too often looks like a game between the Bloods and the Crips without any weapons. There, I said it. Look, it seems that this was a trend throughout basically the entirety of his career. And this isn't something from like the 1980s. This is from like the mid-2000s, this type of dialogue he said. This isn't from 1982, 1990, 1994, 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2000. This is the late 2000s. Every single time he saw black people playing sports, he got very angry at them. He got very angry at how successful they were. He got very angry at how good they were. He got very angry. He wanted to root for white people because he probably found it very difficult to root for black people. And so, when there was too many black people on the team, he was sure to either call them thugs or gangs or the Bloods and the Crips and be very direct about it. That when black people do well in sports, they're a bunch of thugs. That was Rush Limbaugh's riveting sports commentary. Obama's America's white kids get beat up on school buses now. I mean, your kids, you put your kids on the school bus, you expect safety. But in Obama's America, the white kids now get beat up with black kids cheering, yay, right on, right on, right on, right on. This was from 2009. This was quite literally just 3 presidencies ago. This was about 10 years old. So, obviously, the idea is now we have to blame Obama, the black president, for somebody getting beat up on a school bus. And saying because he was elected, maybe black people felt more confident and now they're gonna go beat up all the white people. Obviously, you could talk about how Obama had nothing to do with a specific incident, how kids have been bullied on school buses forever, how kids have gotten beat up on school buses forever, how kids have gotten beat up and school fights existed through every single presidency since the inception of this country. But no. Obama apparently, by being a black president, started a black child uprising on school buses. Holocaust 90 million Indians, only 4 million left, they all have casinos, what's to complain about? Obviously downplaying the genocide of Native Americans. Obviously you can insert any group here and then talk about something nice that's happened to a group of people or some positive thing that's possibly happened. And then you try to wipe away the history because he doesn't want to deal with the history. Because if Rush Limbaugh actually engaged with historical fact of the history of this nation, then his beliefs just wouldn't be able to hold up. Look, I every single time I look at a chat after I say one of these things and you're all like, oh my God. And that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm going through every quote. That's why I'm going through everything he said. Because I don't want anybody 5 or 10 or 20 years from now to rewrite history and pretend, he was kind of edgy. He said a few bad things. But you know what? He enriched the dialogue and helped create alt media. I don't want that. I want us to be honest. I don't want to mock his death, but we cannot pretend that this person had a good impact on this country. We cannot pretend that he was defending freedom. We cannot pretend that he was some lion-hearted man of character when he mocked people who were dying with AIDS, or when he was going after black people for being successful in sport, mocking the children of the president and calling them bitches when they're 13. Or downplaying genocide. We can't pretend that this person had a positive impact on the dialogue. Michelle Obama is a term Limbaugh often uses to refer to the First Lady Michelle Obama, especially when he's discussing her efforts to fight childhood obesity. He used the phrase on his radio program many, many times. Michelle, my butt, offers many first names for the First Lady. There was something really, I mean, Limbaugh, of course, went after Obama due to the fact, like, he was black, which the one instance of, white kids getting beat up on the school bus under Obama's America, as if that's his fault because he got elected to office. As if black people felt confident enough now that they're gonna go beat up all the white kids, as if that was his fault in some wild world, whatever wild perspective he has, that was somehow his fault. But of course, he's gonna take the time to bully the black woman as well. Liberals should not be allowed to buy guns, nor should they be allowed to use computer keyboards or typewriters, word processors, or emails, and they should have their speech controlled. If we did these 3 or 4 things, I can tell you what a sane, calm, civil, fun-loving society we would have. Take guns out of the hands of liberals, take their typewriters and their keyboards away from them. Don't let them anywhere near a gun. Control their speech. You would wipe out 90% of the crime, 85 to 90% of the hate, and 100% of the lies from society. Remember, this is something he's saying in 2011. This is not 1990 or 1992. This is 2011. This was exactly 10 years ago. Exactly 10 years ago. And in the length of his career, that is not very old. And again, this is the lion-hearted defender of freedom Ted Cruz is pointing to. And this is the guy saying, we need to regulate liberal speech because of all the hate, while he's downplaying the effects of genocide, blaming a white kid getting beat up on a school bus on Obama getting elected. Somebody who mocked the deaths of gay people with AIDS with a whole program called the AIDS Update, where he played a song at the intro of it, like Lovin' the Wrong Way. I forget the exact name of the song. This is somebody who sees black people do well in sports, calls them thugs, calls them gangs, says it looks like the Bloods and the Crips fighting when they play football against each other. The next one, this is literally the next day, this is a guy saying we need to take away all the rights from lefties because of all the hate they produce. And literally the next day, this was January 18th, this is January 19th, ching cha, ching chow cho, cha chow, ching ching, ba bao, and a bunch of noises. And this was after him, that's basically him trying to translate the Chinese president's words. And he's saying that we need to regulate the liberals because they produce the hate. Again, you guys are so hateful. By the way, black people in sports, you're all thugs. Let me downplay this genocide over here. Let me laugh and giggle at all the gay people die from AIDS. And let me do this totally accurate translation of the Chinese president. The liberals need to be regulated from speech and producing, and also take their guns away because they produce so much hate. And let me be clear. Let me put a sideline here. The vast majority of terrorism in this country, post 9/11, has been far-right terrorism. And I'm not talking about taking anybody's guns away. But if he's talking about all the violence from the political sides, or all the hate from the political sides, he needs to look in the mirror. There's rioting in the streets now, and there's going to be more rioting in the streets because that's part of the program here. And next up, there's going to be race riots. I guarantee it. Race riots are part of the plan. This regime has "That's next." Basically saying that the president of the United States at the time, Barack Obama, was going to plan and operate race riots. And that's part of the plan. I'm a huge supporter of women. What I'm not is a supporter of liberalism. Feminism is what I oppose. And feminism has led women astray. I love women. I don't know where all this got started. I love the women's movement, especially when walking behind it. Beyonce used to be the lead for a 3-girl group called Destiny's Child, and their songs were an attempt to inspire young women not to take any grief from men. Beyonce's now saying, go ahead, put up with it, and you know why? Because she's got married. She's married to a rich guy. She now understands it's worth it to bow down. Basically saying that Beyonce was a quote-unquote gold digger and bowed down to her husband in order to get rich. Obama says he's Christian, but where's the evidence? Another example of Barack Obama, or this is something that really gets me. Rush Limbaugh going out and pointing to anybody and questioning their faith, their Christianity, to question it is bizarre to me. Absolutely bizarre. And this is for a lot of right-wing commentators that act and talk like Rush Limbaugh. It's something I don't understand. And the reason I don't understand it is because he should know by now all the rhetoric and talk he has engaged in throughout his career. Right? The racism, the homophobia, the lack of compassion. Or what about the fact that he went after people for healthcare and he was like, well, you know what? If you can't afford healthcare, it's just like you can't afford a house in the Bahamas. So whatever. Somebody was calling children, 13-year-old girls, bitches. And that lack of compassion he's thrown through the entirety of his career and supporting presidents like Donald Trump, which literally called for the bombing of civilians in the Middle East, was pro-torture, and called for a ban on Muslims entering this country. By the way, he's the Lionheart who defended of freedom, and he supports the president who wanted to ban a certain religious group from entering the United States. And he is the lion-hearted defender of freedom, and he's going to question other people's faith. When I think a big part of our faith is showing compassion to others, and certainly isn't calling children bitches and supporting people who openly call for the bombing of civilians. But he has the right to question other people's faith. I find that very interesting. Those of you who are not mobilizing to change the Second Amendment, those of you who are not mobilized to make it more difficult to get guns and weapons, are the modern equivalent of people who sat around and let Bull Connor turn his dogs loose on the marches at Selma. If a lot of African Americans back in the 60s had guns and the right to use them for self-defense, you think they would have needed Selma? I don't know. I'm just asking. By the way, black people did pick up guns, and that was made illegal. Not for people to own guns, but laws were put in place specifically to regulate them after they took guns. The Black Panther Party. Looking at California, looking at Ronald Reagan. And many of them were specifically killed by our government. We can just point to Fred Hampton. Anyway, let's move on. But I don't know of the government going out to kill any members of the NRA. What does it say about the college co-ed Susan Fluke, who goes around before a congressional committee and essentially says that she must be paid to have sex? What does that make her? It makes her a slut, right? It makes her a prostitute. Perhaps his most infamous comment in recent memory. Remarks about Sandra Fluke on a radio program in 2012 may have sparked the beginning of the end of Limbaugh's longtime radio contract with Cumulus Media. Let's see if we can get the full report on it. Basically, if I remember correctly, I'm trying to remember because this is from before my time in politics. Sandra Fluke let's see if I can get the story. Convened a meeting. Fluke attended in support of President Obama's ruling that religiously affiliated institutions such as universities, hospitals should provide insurance plans to cover all costs for medical contraceptives. Fluke said, "We do not expect that women would be told in the national media that we should have to go to school elsewhere to receive contraceptive coverage. We use to pick up quality education in our health." So, basically, to be 100% accurate here, what happened is Sandra Fluke went before a committee and said, "I believe these institutions should cover contraceptives." And Rush's response to her completely civil and reasonable political point was, "You're a slut and you're a prostitute." All for saying birth control should be provided. A medical resource should be provided to women. And his response is, "You're a slut and a prostitute." It isn't, let's debate the facts of the issue. Because if he did debate the facts of the issue, he knows he loses. So he has to be a shock jock to get attention. He has to get a shock jock to boost ratings because he's not going to be able to go into the nitty-gritty details of why that would be a bad plan. Because providing birth control for women is actually a decent thing to do, number one. And number two, is actually good for healthcare in this country. It's good that women can actually choose to get birth control and help plan out their life more effectively. If any race of people should not have guilt about slavery, it's Caucasians. We're going to talk more about this quote later. I have the actual footage of this quote. This bonus one, "Take that bone out of your nose and call me back." This comment was made to an African-American caller, predates his syndicated radio show days, but it's too outrageous not to mention. Of course, calling black people barbarian savages was the intent here. So here's just 26, with the bonus one included, of his most interesting comments during his career. Now, we're going to go into the Snopes article about something he did a while ago. Now, I want to say, I do believe people can change, and Rush did apologize for what we're about to talk about. But I don't believe he ever changed on the issue of gay people, or started to reverse his ideology around gay people to an extent of supporting their rights, supporting their adoption rights, or ever really calling for it or anything, trying to reverse that. And also, let me also mention that even if he apologizes and reforms, we cannot still not talk about the impact of his homophobia on the gay community. Did Rush Limbaugh's aid update mock the deaths of gay people? Limbaugh would later say he regretted the segment as it made fun of people who were dying excruciating deaths. This is true. On February 17, 2021, radio host Rush Limbaugh died at the age of 70 after a year-long battle with lung cancer. As conservative fans mourned the death of the radio producer, many on his social media pointed to Limbaugh's history of making sexist, homophobic, and bigoted remarks. Author Jessica Villetti, for example, posted a message on Twitter stating that Limbaugh once had a segment on his show called The AIDS Update that mocked the deaths of gay people. It was set to music where he mocked dying gay people, so I don't really want to hear about speaking ill of the dead today, was her tweet. This is true. While we have not uncovered any audio of these segments, we did find a few contemporaneous news articles and comments from Limbaugh confirming the contents of these controversial segments. Iowa Cedar Gazette reported in 1990 that Limbaugh's AIDS Update, a recurring segment in which he made jokes about diseases that killed more than 100,000 people in the United States the previous decade, started by playing songs such as Back in the Saddle Again, Kiss Him Goodbye, and I Know I'll Never Love This Way Again, and Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. The AIDS Update segment was short-lived. According to the New York Times, it ended after a few weeks. Limbaugh would call the segment one of his most regretful things ever done because it was making fun of people who were dying long, painful, excruciating deaths. Okay. Let's keep going for a second. While Limbaugh would come to regret this segment, it didn't stop him from airing other homophobic content, and this is why I don't really accept the apology. Limbaugh, for instance, had another segment that used former Congressman Barney Funk's, a prominent gay politician, as fodder. That segment featured the song My Boy Lollipop as slurping sounds played in the background. Limbaugh has also spread the unfounded claim that gay men practice gerbling? Oh. Gerbling is the... Okay. If I remember correctly, gerbling was this idea that gay people got live gerbils and put them in places. It's not really an accurate portrayal of a gay man's life. And once said, according to James Rader's book, The Anatomy of Scandal, that gay men deserved their fate. He became a hit by saying things like feminism was established so that unattractive broads could have easy access to the mainstream, a bunch of cows. Environmentalists were wacko tree huggers, and unwanted callers were dispatched with collar abortions, and a vacuum cleaner sound followed by a scream. Gays, he said, deserved their fate, especially popular with his AIDS update, with maintained that gay men like to stimulate themselves with small rodents, and that in great numbers they are reporting to hospital emergency rooms needing gerbils surgically removed from their rectums. The way not to get AIDS was simple, according to Limbaugh. Do not ask another man to bend over and make love at the exit point. Media Matters site has noted that Limbaugh has a history of homophobic remarks. As recently as 2015, Limbaugh was making the argument that marriage equality would lead to bestiality. The entirety of Limbaugh's career was trying to make it so I wouldn't have the right to marry who I wanted, and other people in the LGBT community. The entirety of it. So no, I don't really accept the apology. Now, I pulled up a collection of some of Rush Limbaugh's favorite moments. And by favorite moments, his most despicable moments. Now, I could probably have an hour to 2 hours of dialogue if I had all of it. But here's just a 10-minute video of some of his more racist content.
There's actually a debate going on ESPN and throughout the sports world over who can use the N-word, when and how, and who can't, when and how. A little history lesson for you. If any race of people should not have guilt about slavery, it's Caucasians. The white race has probably had fewer slaves and for a briefer period of time than any other in the history of the world. No other race has ever fought a war for the purpose of ending slavery.
Now, oh God, my thing cut out for a moment. Now, the thing that's interesting to me about this segment generally, is when he says this, I'm genuinely curious as to whether he could actually defend this point if someone was to walk up to him after and ask him what the Civil War was about. If someone called right after this point and he made this point and he said, so the Civil War was about slavery, if he would stand up for it. I actually don't know his position on the Civil War, so I can't say. But I'm very interested and wish before he was gone that somebody could have brought that up to him. Because if the Civil War was about slavery, then obviously it wasn't about states' rights, unless it's states' rights to own slaves. He said it was about states' rights. Okay, so while hypocritical, that's not the main point I wanted to make here. Maybe it's true that white people had slaves for a smaller period of time. And when we say that, it's a really interesting thing to say, because we could talk about the Romans and their institution of slavery. Or we could talk about the difference between chattel slavery and other forms of slavery. We can talk about, but I don't really want to get into that. The reason why he's saying it isn't because he really cares about the history. And nobody's really asking you to feel guilty about slavery. People are just asking for us to confront what happened and deal with the impacts of slavery, the economic disparity, the lack of redlining, segregation, etc. and dealing with the effects of it, wiping out the effects of it, and trying to make it so we have more equality in this country. But he can't, so he tries to pretend that the quest of the left, of course, is to make white people feel guilt. But there's also a thing to be said about the historical misinformation that's being put here, because he's also not talking about the fact that while possibly it wasn't the longest in history, we brought it to more quarters of the globe and made a international slave trade out of it, which was the largest slave trade in history, and we traded more people into enslavement than anyone ever in history. Anyone else. Just wanted to make that clear.
Which we did. Nearly 600,000 people killed in the Civil War. It's preposterous that Caucasians are blamed.
Wait, person in the chat, Flicker. So you say that it was about states' rights. So do you disagree? So, okay. Rush Limbaugh thinks the Civil War is about states' rights, but then he just said we fought a war to end slavery, which of course would be the Civil War. So is it that we fought a war to end slavery, or was the Civil War about states' rights? Which one was it? Which one was it? I'd like to hear. So is Rush wrong here? Or is he wrong before when he said what he said about states' rights? Possibly. Again, I would have to go confirm it. It can be both. So we fought a war over slavery. But then the war was also about, but the war wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights. It was both. Okay. Okay, buddy.
For slavery when they've done more to end it than any other race. It's preposterous that Caucasians are blamed for slavery when they've done more to end it than any other race.
They have discovered that Obama does have slave blood. Slave blood.
I had never experienced the kind of euphoria that I got from a pain pill.
The Republicans are just totally...
Now, the reason why that last statement was particularly vile is because he made a career off of saying that people who use drugs should go to prison and get the harshest penalties under the law.
Bamboozled right now.
Oh.
They think they've got to rebrand, and it's all predicted. They got to reach out to minorities.
1 second. Why does it keep locking off? 1 second. But there we go. Why does that keep happening? Weird.
The Republican Party lost because it's not conservative. Why does putting Condoleezza Rice front and center at the convention not work? Why does putting Marco Rubio front and center at the convention not work? Why does putting Suzanne Martinez, the governor of New Mexico, front and center convention not work? So, nigga.
Whoa! I caught that just in time. Whoa! Whoa! Ooh! I got it right before the end. Saved. Okay. I heard the N, I heard the G, and I was like, nope. And I saved myself, saved the VOD. Okay, I saved the VOD. Wow. Skip this clip, he says it again. Well, I think that speaks for itself. Let's move on to the next one.
The white man through disease and war, and how many people have died, were killed by the arrival of the white man through disease and war, and how many people have died since the white man arrived here due to lung cancer, thanks to the Indian invented custom of smoking tobacco. Who are the real killers here? Where are our reparations? Where are our reparations?
Go that's right out of Adolf Hitler's playbook. Now, what are the similarities between the Democrat Party of...
By the way, the difference would be, of course, you can choose to pick up a cigar or cigarette. You can't choose to catch smallpox. Just gonna make that clear, that smoking a cigarette is not classified as genocide. I just want to be very clear.
Today, and the Nazi Party in Germany. Well, the Nazis were against big business. They hated big.
No, they were not. They worked with big business to establish a lot of, to establish the war machine. They worked with big business a lot. In fact, many would say they were quite corporatist in nature due to how they worked with big business. Not to mention, you can just look at, Mercedes-Benz, Fanta. There's a lot of, we can look at a lot of examples of them working with big business.
Big business. And of course, we all know that they were opposed to Jewish capitalism.
I know the point he's trying to make there, but it's just weird how he said that.
They were insanely, irrationally against pollution. They were for 2 years mandatory voluntary service to Germany. They had a whole bunch of make-work projects to keep people working, one of which was the Autobahn.
Again, so if that's the case we're making, then FDR, the person who fought Hitler, is like Hitler because they both made roads. That's the argument being pushed there.
They were against cruelty and vivisection of animals, but in the radical sense of devaluing human life.
I don't think that's what the left is doing. By the way, Rush, do you want to know another thing the Nazis were all on about?
They banned smoking. They were totally against that. They were for abortion and euthanasia of the undesirables, as we all know.
I just want to bring something up quick. The Nazis are also extremely homophobic and put them in the camps as well. And who else has a long history of homophobia in their career? Just wanted to throw that out there.
And they were for cradle-to-grave nationalized health care.
Well, it's a good point. You know how to stop abortion? Require that each one occur with a gun.
Jesus.
You put your kids on a school bus, you expect safety, but in Obama's America, the white kids now get beat up with the black kids cheering, yeah, right on, right on, right on.
There is an attack on masculinity that's been going on in our culture since the
Rush, the
advent of
ambassador
the
of
modern era
masculinity.
of feminism, the late 60s, early 70s. I mean, the way I've been conditioned by the Democrats and the left in this country, that sounds like a hate crime. That Trayvon Martin starts pummeling Zimmerman because the gal on the phone, Rachel Jeantel, said, hey, a guy could be a rapist, you better run. But Trayvon's no coward. He doesn't run away from stuff, so he starts pummeling on Zimmerman. Folks, there's actually a debate going on ESPN and throughout the sports world over who can use the N-word, when and how.
Don't do it again.
And who can't, when and how.
But we can't go after
You've made your position very
poor
clear.
old Barack that way, because he's a minority. Romney knows how to do this. He did it to Newt, and he did it to Santorum. He knows full well how he has to do this. But I know what they think they're up against. They got the first black president, independence. It's easy to go after Newt or Romney because they're conservatives and everybody hates conservatives anyway. But we can't go after poor old Barack that way because he's a minority. First president in history, to my knowledge anyway, who
Look, you saying we can't go after Barack that way because he's a minority, when you're quite literally, like, the same year he was elected, we're saying that because he was elected, black people were just beating up white kids on the school bus, and how you talked about his wife, or any other thing you've talked about Barack Obama about. Or the idea that Barack Obama's economic plan included inciting race riots. I think you don't really think that you don't have the ability to go over Obama because he's black.
actually wants his nation to fail. Obama wants to...
Remember, there was a scandal over the color of his suit when we talk about Barack Obama. So it's not like people were holding back on the guy.
Create an illegal alien bill of rights. We're not governed by people who do not like the country. Who is Obama? Why is he doing this? Why? He wouldn't have been voted president if he weren't black.
Let me put it to you this way. The NFL, all too often, looks like a game between the Bloods and the Crips without any weapons. Day mocking the standard. Who dat? Who dat say Day mocking the standard? Al Sharpton say Day mocking the standard. How many people really think of Obama as black? He's not from the hood. He's not from the movement. When I hear
Rush
Chinese
Limbaugh,
or
hood
Japanese, it sounds
understander.
like all the same word.
It is these wackos, from Bill Ayers to Jeremiah Wright to other anti-American, Afrocentric, black liberation theologists, working with Acorn.
Acorn
and
had its own
Barack
conspiracy.
Obama
That
is
came
smack
from
dab in
Project
the middle
Veritas.
of it. They have been training young black kids to hate this country. And they trained their parents before that to hate this country.
Here's my premise, and you agree with it or not, that if you have money, you're going to get health care. If you don't have money, it's more difficult.
If you have money, you're going to get a house on the beach. If you don't have money, you're going to live in a bungalow somewhere.
Right.
That's
Right, but we're talking about health care.
what's the difference?
The difference is we're talking about health care,
No,
not a house and a bungalow.
You're assuming that there's some morally superior aspect to health care.
The difference is we're talking about health care.
Okay. So actually, they're actually, he's kind of right. I think healthcare and housing, Rush is right here. When it comes to healthcare and housing, there's actually not that much of a morally superior difference here. All human beings should have healthcare and housing. But the difference when it comes specifically to healthcare is that it's a captive market. If you don't get help, then you're going to die. You need healthcare. You need assistance. It's the same way with insulin. It's the same way why insulin prices, no matter how high they put them, people are gonna have to use insulin or else they die. It's a captive market. Healthcare is the same way. If I don't have healthcare, then if I get sick and I can't cover the costs, then I'm gonna have to make cuts on the amount of quality and the amount of service I get that can lead to me dying. And don't even get me started on preemptive care. Don't even get me started when it comes to healthcare and preemptive care. But again, this lack of compassion towards people who are sick or dying. And he's the one who questioned Obama's dedication to the faith. When I read the good book, what I took of it was help thy neighbor. I guess when he read it, though, he took fuck 'em out of it. What an interesting individual.
No.
Not a house and a bungalow.
You're assuming that there's some morally superior aspect to health care. I'm telling you earlier, I'm not a conformist. I hated school because it's what everybody else had to do.
Hey, Rush.
Mr. President, sir.
All is well. Do you see our man Ailes at all?
Oh, yeah,
We're on the radio, are we?
For years, the radio talk show host had taken a tough stand on drug cases, advocating prison time for the crimes. But that's not what happened when he faced his own drug charge.
I am addicted to prescription pain medication.
I had never experienced the kind of euphoria that I got from a pain pill. So the pain pills came along and they...
This is particularly painful because the same time he was advocating, the same exact time he was advocating the toughest extent of the law to people who are using drugs, was the same time my mom was shooting dope. And the same time she had to avoid law enforcement and she had to not get help because of the policies this man was pushing. But then when he gets addicted, it's a 180 and he's fine. He doesn't need to be taught. He doesn't need to put under the law. He shouldn't get sentenced with the full extent of the law. He should be fine. He should be able to avoid it. But my mom, she shouldn't get help. She should be put behind a fucking prison cell. And this is why, while I'm not going to mock the man's death, because I know the type of pain that can cause a family, let's not play revisionism when it comes to the impact this man had on American dialogue towards marginalized groups and vulnerable people. Even children.
mask all these feelings of inadequacy that I had.
Rush is by far the most articulate, defining voice of conservatism in America today, the most articulate voice of Reagan conservatism in the country. Rush is a powerful voice. I would argue that Rush is the leader of the conservative movement in the country. I know him.
The sad thing is, Sean's right.
He's a gracious,
when it comes to him being a leader of the conservative movement.
Rush is the leader in radio.
Voice.
Everybody's making immigration proposals these days. Let me add
Listen,
mine to the mix. Call it the
Ted
Limbaugh
Cruz.
laws first.
Before you hear about his Limbaugh laws, remember, this is the man that Ted Cruz said tried to rewrite history and said this guy's the defender of freedom and a patriot. Remember, Ted Cruz, the same person who just went to Cancun to flee the situation in Texas so he can bring his daughters on vacation. Look, by the way, I just want to say quickly on the Ted Cruz issue, I personally would be very happy if Ted Cruz left Texas, never returned. Personally. If he wants to go to Cancun and stay there, I'm fine with that. Personally. But I think during a crisis, when people are quite literally freezing to death, maybe he should still be in the state and doing some leadership. You know what he was elected to do. But remember, this is the man that Ted Cruz said was the defender of freedom.
You immigrate to our country, you have to speak the native language. You have to be a professional or an investor. No unskilled workers allowed. Also, there'll be no special bilingual programs in the schools with the Limbaugh laws, no special ballots for elections, no government business will be conducted in your language. Foreigners will not have the right to vote or hold political office. If you're in our country, you cannot be a burden to taxpayers. You are not entitled to welfare or food stamps or other government goodies. You can come if you invest here, an amount equal to 40,000 times a daily minimum wage. If not, stay home. But if you want to buy land, it'll be restricted. No waterfront, for instance, and as a foreigner, you have to relinquish individual rights to the property. And another thing. You don't have the right to protest. You're allowed no demonstrations, no foreign flag waving, no political organizing, no bad-mouthing our president or his policies. You're a foreigner. Shut your mouth or get out. And if you come here illegally, you're going to jail.
This is the man that's the supposed defender of freedom that Ted Cruz points to. Someone who wanted to restrict people's right to speech. Someone who wanted to restrict people's right to property, a person who was actively going out, the nation that was built on immigrants, actively going out to target them and take away their rights. Take away the right to vote, take away the right to speech, take away their right to property. And he is the lion-hearted defender of freedom that Ted Cruz is pointing to. No, I don't agree with Sean Hannity on a lot, but Sean Hannity was right. This was the man who was the voice of the conservative movement when it comes to talk radio. He helped reverse it. Many people say he saved AM radio. But you know what? That voice was rotten to the core. He worsened the dialogue in this country. And we can see the results of it today with people like Donald Trump being able to mount himself to the presidency, getting elected and his vitriol being spit out. The same type of dialogue this man threw at immigrants is the same type of dialogue that the former president, I would like to say, Donald Trump, threw at Muslims, saying they should be banned from entering the United States. That we needed a Muslim ban. Not to mention the same homophobia he pushed through the entirety of his presidency, Donald Trump's administration did behind closed doors when it comes to the issues like adoption rights or the trans military ban. So, I am not going to participate in the mocking of the dead. I am not going to let Ted Cruz, Steven Crowder, or anyone rewrite history and pretend that this man was a defender of freedom.